There are few occasions when a watch becomes an instant classic. In our world of accessible sports watches, some that draw from old school inspirations, a handful have managed to establish themselves as ones that'll last the ages. The Zin 104, a modest pilot watch that covers all aspects that makes for a perfect daily wearer. The Black Bay, Tudor's attempt at breathing some life into a Submariner-styled watch with a vintage touch, now seen as, we could all believe, one of the most successful watches of all time. And the Seiko Prospex SPB, a watch that Seiko created that coincides with this professional instrument, while also pulling inspiration from their first ever dive watch, the 62 MAS. There are plenty more examples in this category, but what is it about these watches that they all seem to have in common? So let's get to it. Their designs are simple and straightforward. They are by no means pretentious. They never ask for your attention, they just do their job. They are relatively affordable. Relatively, I mean when I say that, you can do far better and you can do far worse. These watches are generally pretty bulletproof, sapphire crystals. They're made of great materials. But the best part of all, as daily wearing watches go, they are all sized extremely well. We could say near perfect for most wrists. And this is the epitome of what makes for a perfect watch, a perfect daily wearer, an essential. And 9 times out of 10, it looks like it's extremely hard to pull off. So what then makes for the best everyday Seiko? It should in theory have all of these traits, and for this video the SPB143 will be the example that you will be seeing. There are many, many more in this category. So think of this as sort of a semi-watch review and an analysis around the theme of a daily wearing Seiko. And by the end of this video I'll be covering the positives and the negatives of this category. I feel that a lot of us take the significance of the Seiko Prospex SPB for granted nowadays, mainly because it's always been there in the background. It arrived a few years ago and ever since, like a handful of other great pieces, it can be seen as a collection essential for some or a piece to get you into this hobby further. Now sure, we could say that a watch like the Tudor Black Bay 58 brought the 39mm size back into vogue again and made it cool. I mean, it's always been the rave of our watch community ever since. But the Seiko SPB, I think it made it mainstream. It solidified the size. It sealed the deal, and it made it far more accessible for the rest of the world. I mean, you take a look at this piece, and it seems like they hit all the marks perfectly. From its diameter to a simple but effective contrast of grey on black or black on gold, depending on the models you're looking at. And the small details like a fully graduated bezel, applied markers, phenomenal lume. I mean, even to this day, I don't think any other brand rivals Seiko when it comes to lume. It's ridiculously good. As most of us know now, the late 60s, the early 70s revival of pieces is huge. 70s inspired watches in all fields are returning, or in some rare cases, their modern inspirations were taken from these elements. I'm not ashamed to say that my Pelagos FXD, now a prized watch in my collection, pulls inspiration from a watch like the Seiko SPB when you look at its lugs. The beauty is that both of these watches look great now and will look great in 10 years' time. They will still be relevant in 100 years' time if watches and timekeeping is important by then. And that is the quintessence of good design. No matter the product, good design is long-lasting. So when Seiko was able to achieve a result like the SPB, well, the floodgates opened, and as we've seen, the development of the Turtle collection, the Samurais, the Sumos, many of which all have the Prospex branding, they were given the same treatment. Look at the new Heritage Turtle 68 reinterpretation. What a fantastic watch this is. I mean, look at how much care went into getting the plots right, the date window framing. What about the return of the Citizen ProMaster mechanical diver? That deserves a video. A great watch with a cool backstory and a design that follows the cues that have come to define the late 60s models. Now, as most of us know, the SPB and others stemmed originally from the SLA series, a group of Prospex models that paid tribute to past originals. The SLA017, which is based on the 62 MAS, which is based on the Blancpain bathyscaphe in the early 60s. We won't talk about that though, that's a whole ownership issue for another time. The SLA033 based on the Willard, the 6105, which really was the icon that pushed Seiko's dive watches into the future. After the success of this SLA series, which was quite clear, the enthusiasts love this watch. And Seiko tested the waters with more attainable versions of their classics. These models weren't given the same Zaratsu polishing or given Grand Seiko movements, but were treated well. And so the model that I'm showing you today, the SPB143, hilariously enough, it has been nicknamed the Mark I because the current examples today have lume at the 3 o'clock position, and enthusiasts are more keen on the Mark I dials without the extra plot. I think it's a bit more streamlined. I've had this watch in my collection for almost 2 years, and even today, it astounds me how much attention went into this piece. In more ways than one, I see this as modern Seiko at its finest. This feels like a premium product in hand. Great weight, a feeling of heft, the brushing, the polishing, some of the best anti-reflective coating used on the sapphire crystal, and the light play when the sun hits the dial directly. It's special. So getting deeper into the Seiko swimming pool, I've had hands-on with an SKX in the past. I was able to get hands-on with the Cherry Dial Grand Seiko. Shout out to Lucy at WatchBox Diaries. And even as far up as the Marine Master Emperor Tuner. What an amazing watch that is. If we talk about a watch that's built for purpose. The Marine Master 1000 passed its depth rating and stopped at 4,300 meters underwater, literally surviving 4 times its depth rating requirement. But all the while, this watch wears great, it's comfortable, even at 45 millimeters. So you look at the baseline SPB, like the one I'm wearing, or even as high up as the professional rated Marine Master, and all of these watches just function and wear superbly as daily drivers. Back on topic, let's first cover the downsides before covering the positives of the SPB and many of these Prospex models in general. The movement accuracy. The 6R35, it's built like a tank, but as we know, accuracy can be an issue. Very odd pluses and minuses, but this can be remedied. You can have this watch regulated. I've just heard and experienced it myself that these watches from the factory can be hit or miss at times when it comes to movement accuracy. Quality control. Now, small things like the bezel not lining up exactly or the chapter ring being misaligned, it's Seiko's calling card at this point, but I must say that the Prospex Collection tends to be far better when it comes to quality control compared to their previous generations. I've been pretty lucky in this category. The bezel seems to line up pretty nicely. Sounds great. I mean, there's this distinct Prospex click that the Seiko bezels have, which is quite nice. And this is a bit of a vendetta I have with Seiko and these Prospex models, but something that really bugs me is the choice of handset they've used, as well as the typeface arrangement. And this can be so easily remedied. We look at the original models where they take their inspiration from. I believe that the automatic script should be underneath the Seiko name, first off. It's a really easy thing to change. The Prospex logo on the dial can either be hit or miss at times. I think more often than not it should be removed from the dial and instead left on the case back. And with the stick hands that they decide to go with a lot of these pieces, they opt to make the hour hand thicker than the minute hand, which makes a lot more sense from a practicality point of view. But only the Marine Master in the early days used this configuration. And there's something quite charming about how Seiko used hands that were the same size if we look at the original Willard, if we look at the original 6.2 MAS. There is something a bit more dress-oriented and a bit more elegant about how the hands were done back then. And those are really the 2 changes that I would ask for. I would want the text to be adjusted, 1 line of text saying dive is 200 meters, Seiko automatic used at the top of the dial, and the original handset where the hour hand is the same thickness. That's about it. And those are really all the improvements that I have. Maybe we could go further and say that the bracelets could use a bit more love and care, even though they are great improvements over the previous generations. But regardless of the model you choose, the design you go after, what's great about these Prospex models that's just excellent in so many other respects? We talk about wearability and Seiko's case design. Where do we even start? Their 6.2 MAS skin diver case is phenomenal. The size, the dimensions, proportions, the way they managed to bring the lug length down to such an extent that the watch wears much smaller than it might suggest. We then move to a model like the SLA033 or the 6105 turtle case of the Willard. That watch measures 44 millimeters in diameter, but wears like a 42. It feels even smaller on the wrist, and that's all down to how they adjust the lug length on these pieces. We go as far up to wear the Seiko Tuner, 45 millimeters and beyond, and it still wears phenomenally well. You look at any other watch brand and the way they arrange their pieces, those kinds of numbers deter us from even trying them on. But with Seiko, they constantly seem to be getting it right when it comes to just how comfortable the watch wears on a smaller wrist. This cannot be emphasized enough. If you're going after a Seiko, know that you're going to be getting such a well-proportioned and excellent wearing experience when it comes to just how well the watch sits on your wrist. Then it's the value for money question. Now, yes, the prices of these Prospex models, they have increased quite considerably next to the earlier generations of pieces like the SKX. But I do believe that so much more has been put into not only the attention to the movements, but also the small elements like their quality control, like the materials. We're not using mineral crystals anymore, we're using sapphire crystals, many of which use ceramic bezels. Some use hardened stainless steel. Many of Seiko's cases and bracelets are coated with a dia shield coating, which creates a far more scratch-resistant surface. Believe it or not, having this watch on the wrist, wearing it all over the place, I still haven't been able to find a scratch on the top of its lugs. And then we move across to some things that us as enthusiasts would really appreciate, all in-house. In-house manufacture, in-house movement. Of course, there is a bit of leeway around here. I'm sure lots of things are outsourced to other parts of the world. But when you compare this brand to other well-known makers, you'll find that a lot more originates around Japan and around Seiko's manufacturing plant, which is fantastic. And there are so few brands today that can actually boast about the fact that their movements are solely theirs and in-house manufactured. That always has been an exceptional thing about what Seiko offers us, and that's the reason why so many of us as enthusiasts love the brand. As far as a Seiko 5, a cheap entry-level piece, or going further up to Grand Seiko, or in between, looking at these Prospex models, manufacture calibers. And then it's about getting into the design and talking about how this is a distinctly Japanese-made product. And this could be identified in so many ways. The minimalism, the use of polishing and brushing, the choice of going with sharp edges or rounded edges. And far better than many of their Swiss contemporaries, there is a sense of fluidity between the case and the dial, and how these two elements flow together. Japanese design tends to be about nature and about organic forms and about flow, and do give off a complementary relationship. This is something that a lot of well-established watch brands still struggle to do today. But Japanese design always seems to be on point, and I love the fact that it's almost recognizable from a distance nowadays. Honestly, the hardest question you need to ask yourself is which watch best suits you. Because I truly believe that these Prospex models offer so much. Seiko in general is a brand that I think you should be getting into for the fun of it, for the accessibility, for the affordability, and the fact that they've managed to take these newly spec'd professional models and improve them in so many ways. Of course, we can see that they are trying to compete against the Swiss industry, the watches that they offer, but the beauty is that they're giving them to us at half the price. And in our collections, most of our collections that are strongly Swiss-oriented, it's really nice to inject something else, a bit of Japanese design into the equation. I feel that there's a great sense to how Seiko is attacking this new series of pieces, where they are injecting an artisanal approach into their more rugged utilitarian pieces. And this is something that many other brands just aren't doing. If it's a case of cost cutting, if it's the fact that they don't believe that the watches deserve that. But what makes this brand great, I think, is that Seiko manages to inject a point of difference that is unexpected. And from it, we get a whirlwind of colors, a selection of pieces that do pull from past inspirations, but also give them a sense of modernity. But all the while, they wear great, they're excellent daily watches that maybe we don't hold with so much reverence, but they are the ones that do all the hard work. So it is quite amazing to see how the Seiko Prospex collection has expanded over the years and will probably continue to expand. And I think many are enjoying the fact that the brand took a step back and paid more attention to the small details that they may have neglected years before. With all of that said, whether you're new to this hobby or you want to experience Japanese design, I would recommend these Prospex pieces. They are great fun, they're easy to wear, they're dynamic, and shares a completely different perspective.